Hello, my dear friends. Today I will tell you a mysterious story about the rivalry between two sisters, Crystal Maiden and Lina, the Flame and the Frost. Origins. Part 1. The Longing. First, between hearth and hope. In a modest house at the edge of the old forest, where the roots of ancient trees heaved up the earth and the winds played secrets through the eaves, lived a man and his wife. Their names, swept away by the sands of time, are now known only to those who pore over the whispered legends of the ancients. Yet their story survived not for its grandeur, but for its aching humanity. In the first light of dawn, the wife would rise, her hair braided in a simple knot, her eyes the color of rain-washed bark, and slip from under the homespun blankets. The world outside would still be shrouded in blue-gray mist, birds not yet daring to sing. She moved through her small house, her home, her sanctuary, though lately it felt more like a well-appointed cage. She set water over the fire, careful to coax the embers back to life. Steam curled from the kettle like a ghost. She listened for her husband's footsteps, slow and heavy, as he woke and stretched in the room beyond. He emerged, tall and broad-shouldered as an oak tree. His hands were strong from years harvesting wood and tending to their vegetable patch, but there was a softness in his gaze reserved only for her. "Did you sleep?" he would ask each morning. "Poorly," she'd answer, though both knew why. Their silence then was heavy with shared longing, a longing that penetrated every corner of their days. It was a hunger for laughter in small shoes echoing on floorboards, for cries in the middle of the night, for tiny hands gripping their fingers. Yet the gods had turned their faces away, despite prayers to all known shrines and offerings at every change of season. No child's laughter ever warmed their heart. For a time, they found comfort in one another's arms, in whispered promises that patience would bear fruit. But as months turned to years, hope grew brittle. Shadows lengthened across their home and hearts alike. It was she who spoke first of leaving. "If there are other gods," she said one evening, voice trembling as she pressed her head into his shoulder, "surely one will listen." He looked out their window at the gathering dusk, the forest thick with memory and regret. "We have little to lose," he answered, his voice low. "Perhaps we have everything to gain." So it was decided. With morning, they would pack what little food and coin remained, lace up sturdy boots, and set foot into a world that promised nothing but uncertainty. The pilgrimage begins. The world beyond their door was vast, a tapestry of green valleys threaded with silver rivers, of mountains rising like old gods themselves into cold clouds. For days they followed winding paths through meadows sweet with wild flowers and woods thick with mossy silence. They sought out priests in moss-grown temples who claimed wisdom beyond mere mortals, healers whose hands could draw forth poison and pain alike, oracles who peered into bowls of black water and saw futures unspooling. All offered rituals, spells, or whispered advice. At each altar they knelt hand in hand, repeating the wishes of their hearts, until words lost all meaning. One priestess wrapped them both in ribbons soaked in honeyed wine and chanted invocations to Elune the Moon Mother. Another old magus burned rare incense that stung their eyes and muttered charms in forgotten tongues. They drank infusions both bitter and sweet, bathed at crossroads where rivers met, spent coin on talismans fashioned from boar's teeth, crow feathers, fragments of starstone. Nothing changed. Winter came, cruel and pitiless, and they huddled together for warmth beneath weathered cloaks. When spring returned at last, coaxing green from dead earth, they pressed on still heavier in spirit. Villages turned into towns. Towns dwindled to scattered steads. Sometimes they found work for food or shelter, a day's labor, mending fences or gathering roots, before moving on again. All the while their hope faded, not with a sudden thunderclap, but with the slow, inexorable drip of time. Third night, fires. There were moments that almost felt like old happiness. At night, around their small campfire, far from any roof or rule, they would share stories. How, as a girl, she'd believed the stars were chips flaked from a giant shield. How, as a boy, he'd once climbed atop his father's barn to catch them. She laughed gently at his boasting. He marveled at her quiet wisdom. Yet even these stories circled eventually back to their unspoken grief. My mother always said children were the world's magic, she murmured one night as sparks whirled up to join the constellations. But what if there's no magic left for us? He reached across the embers and squeezed her hand. If there is any magic left anywhere, he vowed softly, I will find it for you. A shooting star streaked overhead, a promise written in fire, and she closed her eyes against sudden tears. The whispering road. So passed 2 years, a slow migration from green north to dry south, from faith to restlessness to something darker still. Their faces grew leaner, their laughter rarer, but desperation has its own momentum. One evening in a bustling border town, halfway between mountain shadow and sun-bleached plain, they heard old travelers speak in hushed tones. Beyond the black hills lies the shimmering desert. The sands there move as if alive. Their patterns speak of prophecy to those who watch long enough. Some say the gods walk there still, buried deep beneath dunes. They say wishes are granted, although not always as you'd expect. The couple exchanged glances. Faint hope flickering once more. That night, she dreamed. Visions of golden dunes under an impossible sky. Silver snakes winding through starlit sand. A great shadow circling above, a shape both beautiful and terrible. When she woke, heart pounding, she pressed her lips to her husband's brow. We must try, she whispered. And so they did. The shimmering desert. The journey to the desert was arduous, a passage through thorn-thicketed groves where jackals called at dusk, across salt pans so bright they blinded at noon, among rocky outcrops where wild goats leapt between sunlit crags. With each step southward, the land grew stranger. The very air shimmered with unseen promise or warning. At last, they crested a final ridge and saw it. The shimmering desert, endless waves of gold beneath a sky so blue it seemed newly made each dawn. Here the sands glittered as if flecked with glass. Here heat danced upon the horizon. Here silence pressed close as velvet. Yet this silence was not empty. It teemed with presence. They made camp by a date palm at the edge of an oasis. Sweet water pooled between rocks, reeds nodding in secret breezes. They drank gratefully, filled flasks, relished fruit plucked fresh from dappled shade. But even in this brief respite, they felt watched. by something older than gods or men. Sixth, the living sands. On their second dusk in that place, she wandered alone along the water's edge as her husband dozed beside their small fire. The wind changed, first warm and familiar, then suddenly cool, as if drawn from ages past. She knelt to touch the sand, fine as flour, yet strangely heavy, alive beneath her palm. It shifted fractionally, a ripple running outward like breath. She snatched her hand away and stumbled back toward camp. As night fell, fully darkness pressed in across the oasis like ink poured over parchment. But above them, stars burned so bright they seemed ready to fall. That night, she dreamed again, not of stars or snakes, but of vast golden eyes watching from beneath dunes older than memory itself. 7. The decision. Come morning, they debated whether to press onward or retreat while strength remained. Her husband traced lines in sand with a stick, a map of all they had tried and all that had failed them. "We are near the end," he confessed finally. "If there is no answer here," she took his hand, not for comfort, but conviction. "We have come this far," she said gently. "We cannot turn back now." So together they waited, watchful under date palm shade, for whatever might come next. 8th, gods and mortals. As noon approached on their third day by the oasis, heat shimmered until even shadows seemed uncertain. A distant sound trembled through air, a low, resonant note like thunder far off or drums beneath earth's skin. Birds scattered suddenly from reeds, water stilled, even wind dared not move. He rose first, heart hammering, as if he sensed what approached before his mind could name it. A darkness swept across sun-blasted sand, a vast shadow falling like a curtain drawn high above them. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet. She clung to him in sudden terror as sand began to whip into spirals, miniature cyclones swirling outward before collapsing into silence once more. From this silence emerged not monster nor man, but something greater, a dragon, the likes of which neither mortal nor legend had prepared them for. 9th, a meeting written in fire. He was vast. Scales glimmered gold-orange in sunlight, eyes shone molten topaz flecked with green. Wings spread wide enough to darken half the oasis. Tail coiled like living thunder behind him. Yet there was wisdom in those ancient eyes, a sorrow older than mountains themselves. And though his nostrils steamed, he did not unleash flame upon them. Instead, he spoke, not with words alone, but with power woven into every syllable. "Why have you come so far? What do you seek beneath my sky?" Their voices shook with awe, but honesty prevailed. "We seek what all mortals crave," said the husband at last, a sign that hope is not lost. The dragon considered, gaze flickering between them as if weighing souls upon unseen scales. 10th embers of destiny. The air itself pulsed with magic as silence stretched between dragon and mortals. At length he lowered his great head until eyes leveled with theirs, a furnace behind each gaze, and spoke again. "Many come seeking fortune or favor. Few bring such devotion nor such pain." He extended a talon sharp as obsidian, yet trembling slightly with compassion, and beckoned them forward. "Will you accept my gift?" His voice rumbled, the storm before summer rain, and in that sound was both warning and promise. They nodded wordlessly, hands entwined tighter still. It was then, raising his head high above, that he breathed upon them, not fire, but heat, pure and searing, golden as dawn itself. It washed over skin like silk, turned to flame, filled lungs with molten light, pressed deeper still until sorrow itself seemed burned away, leaving only possibility behind. When it ended, they collapsed together, held upright only by each other's arms, the dragon regarding them with something like pride before launching upward on wings that shattered silence itself. He vanished behind sun-drenched clouds, leaving behind only ripples in sand, and hope rekindled at last. 11th in silence after. For long minutes after his departure, neither spoke, only lay together by waterside trembling with exhaustion and awe alike. It was she who broke silence at last. "Did you feel it?" she whispered hoarsely, pressing a hand to her chest where warmth lingered inexplicably bright. He nodded, tears streaking gritty cheeks, as laughter bubbled up for first time in years. The gods may have turned away, but perhaps dragons remember mercy. Above them, the sky blazed impossibly blue, the world remade beneath its gaze, and though neither knew what came next, both believed once more that miracles walked among mortals still. Thus begins the tale, the longing that led two souls across worlds old and new, in search not just of children, but of hope itself, and set loose forces that would shape destinies far beyond their own. The Flame and the Frost. Origins. Part 2. The Dragon's Oasis. First, across the searing expanse. Days bled together beneath the ruthless sun, the couple pressing onward through lands where sand whispered secrets and heat shimmered like spirits in the air. Each dawn was cruel. The wind bit at their cheeks, and their feet sank into powder soft as ash. The desert silence was oppressive, broken only by the rasp of breath and the rare cry of a circling vulture. At dusk, when the sky ignited in indigo and orange, the wife unfurled a small, tattered map, lines fading where hope wore thin. The husband would draw her close, murmuring encouragement. Sometimes he hummed ancient lullabies, the melodies haunting in their longing, but as days grew into weeks, cracks spiderwebbed through their resolve. Not once did they speak of turning back. On the 12th day, a storm rose from nowhere. Winds howled like wolves, and sand lashed their faces raw. They clung to one another, finding shelter in the shadow of a broken obelisk half swallowed by shifting dunes. It was here, bruised by elements and desperation alike, that the first true doubt crept in. Perhaps. "This is folly," she whispered, voice muffled against his shirt. He caught her chin, eyes fierce despite exhaustion. "Number, the gods may have turned from us, but we walk onward, or else we surrender to emptiness." The storm raged through the night, but when dawn broke, a miracle glimmered on the horizon, an emerald ribbon winding through gold, an oasis. Second, the living oasis. To mortals parched to their soul, water was more than salvation. It was proof that destiny had not abandoned them. Palms arched overhead, blue lilies floated upon mirrored pools, frogs croaked in low harmony. All around, life pulsed, vibrant and untamed. They drank greedily. The wife knelt by the spring, cupping water in trembling hands, letting it spill over cracked lips. The husband washed sweat and grit from his face, gazing at her as though seeing her anew, not just his wife, but his journey's purpose embodied. When thirst was finally sated, they rested beneath a willow, letting its silvered leaves shade them from the afternoon blaze. For the first time in many moons, hope pressed gently against their sorrow, and yet the silence here was too deep. Even as they closed their eyes, the hush between heartbeats and unease coiled in the air, as if something vast watched from somewhere unseen. Third shadows beneath sunlight, night arrived in velvet hush. Stars emerged, cold and myriad above. The couple lay beside one another on sand still warm from daylight's touch. Suddenly, the husband stiffened. A sound like thunder rolled low and distant, but no storm marred the sky. The ground trembled beneath them, soft ripples disturbing the edges of the pool. They sat upright, fear prickling along spines, and saw it. Two eyes glinting gold green from across the water. The reeds parted as something massive moved within their depths. Then a shape began to emerge, scaled and sinuous, coalescing between moonlight and shadow. A dragon, real as death, beautiful as dawn, unfurled himself from darkness. Fourth worm of the desert dawn. He was immense, scales burnished with molten gold and streaked with amber flame, wings folded like living tapestries, each membrane translucent and veined with shifting fire. His head bowed low, horns arching back like ancient crowns, and his gaze fixed upon them with an intelligence that dwarfed any mortal's comprehension. The air itself seemed to cower around him. For a moment, neither man nor woman could speak. The dragon's presence pressed down with terrible majesty. Each breath he took resounded like distant drums of war. His eyes were wells of memory, victories and losses carved into every facet. At last he spoke, not with words alone, but with a resonance that entered their bones. "Why do you trespass upon my sanctuary?" His voice echoed through oases, stirring ripples on water and wind alike. The husband swallowed his terror, finding courage in his wife's trembling hand, clasped tight within his own. "We seek only a blessing," he managed, voice rough as gravel. "We have wandered far because there is no hope left at home." The dragon's serpentine face regarded him for a long moment, then shifted to study the woman beside him. "All mortals seek something," boomed the dragon. "Gold, glory, life restored or forgiven." He dipped his head lower. "What do you seek that neither gods nor fate have granted?" Her lips parted, uncertain, but her answer was honest. "A child," she whispered fiercely, tears staining her cheeks silver in starlight. "The chance to kindle life where only longing has burned." A shudder passed through the dragon's frame, a memory perhaps of pain older than kingdoms, or pity deeper than any well's end. We bargain in firelight. Silence stretched between them until even the frogs ceased their song. Then, slowly, the dragon extended one clawed forelimb and traced a circle in sand before their feet. Where claw met earth, sparks danced before dying. "Many ask for what is not theirs to take," he murmured, his voice now gentler. "A river before flood waters break. If I grant you this boon," he continued, "its price will echo for generations, for magic is never given without consequence." His tail swayed, a thundercloud coiling behind him. The husband exchanged glances with his wife. Grief and yearning warred across their faces. "Whatever the cost," he said hoarsely, "we accept it. The dragon studied them both, measuring resolve as one might test steel in flame. "I do not grant gifts lightly," he said at last, "but in your hearts burns a devotion fierce enough to shame gods." He lifted his head until his eyes gleamed brighter than moon above. "Very well." His wings flared open, scattering embers into night air. "But first, you must face my trial." Sixth, the dragon's trial. Wind tore at them as the world blurred and twisted. The oasis vanished beneath golden haze. Suddenly, they stood elsewhere, at the edge of memory and dream alike. Before them stretched visions, their life together unfolding in fragments both bitter and sweet. A cradle left empty beside a sunlit window, laughter echoing from neighbors' yards while their own house remained silent. Countless nights spent weeping in one another's arms. Hope rekindled only to be dashed again by disappointment's cruel hand. Yet always, always, they reached for each other amid despair, never turning away. Every scene burned like brand against soul, forcing them to confront all that had been lost and all that bound them still. A voice, wind sharp, cut through. If you would bear new life, you must not only endure pain, but release it. Grief cannot be a prison. It must be kindling. Tears streamed down their faces. They clung together as memories flared and faded, leaving a rawness both terrible and pure. Finally, as dawn crested dream's horizon, the vision broke apart like glass. Seventh, the dragon's gift. They collapsed to their knees amid cool grass once more. The oasis returned around them, but something within had changed. Sorrow burned away until only possibility remained. The dragon loomed overhead, his expression unreadable but tinged with solemn pride. "You have crossed fire and memory," he intoned. "You have chosen hope where bitterness could have ruled." He drew close, a furnace made flesh, and exhaled a plume of golden flame that danced harmlessly over their bowed heads. Heat surged through them. It was not pain, but promise, the forging of something new within brokenness. As warmth faded, he dipped his head still lower, so ancient eyes met theirs across shadows and starlight alike. "In time," he said softly, "the gift you seek shall be granted. But know this, all such blessings shape worlds beyond imagination." The husband reached for his wife's hand, a silent vow renewed beneath dragon's gaze. "Thank you," she whispered, not quite believing what hope now fluttered within her chest. The desert night seemed to sigh in relief, the wind gentler now, stars shining brighter overhead, as if fate itself had been coaxed into mercy by mortal persistence and draconic grace. Eighth, departure at dawn. When dawn finally blushed across horizon, painting clouds rose gold, the dragon retreated to water's edge. He watched as couple gathered scant belongings, no longer merely weary travelers, but souls transformed by ordeal. As they prepared to leave, he spoke once more, his words tumbling like stones down mountainside. "Remember this, miracles are not ends, but beginnings. What you carry home will shape not just your lives, but the fate of many yet unborn." With that, he slipped beneath emerald surface, ripples spreading until even memory seemed uncertain he had ever been there at all. The couple lingered by oasis, awe mingling with gratitude, before turning eastward once again, hearts lighter and burden heavier all at once. Behind them the sun rose higher, casting long shadows toward home and toward legends yet unwritten. Thus did hope return to two wandering souls, born not from caprice of gods, but from fire-forged trial and draconic mercy, in a story whose embers would ignite ages yet to come. The Flame and the Frost. Origins. Part 3. The First Ember. First, a season of waiting. The journey home from the oasis was unlike the desperate trek that had brought them to the dragon's domain. Now, each step was lighter, as if the very earth buoyed them along. Still, uncertainty clung to their heels, a timid shadow that would not be banished by the mere promise of hope. No matter how miraculous, the wife's hand found her husband's often, sometimes for comfort, sometimes for the simple reassurance that they had both survived what came before. Sometimes, in the cool of evening, she would touch her belly as though expecting to feel something new blooming within her already. But seasons change at their own pace. The world did not pause for a miracle. Their return passed almost unnoticed by their neighbors. Only the old woman who lived nearest, with a gaze sharp as a falcon's, squinted at the couple as they passed through the village. There was weariness in the set of their shoulders, but also a fragile brightness, an ember uncertain of its own flame. "They have gone far," she muttered to herself, "and brought something back." In the nights that followed, the wife lay awake as wind rustled through the newly green trees outside their window. Time stretched, a cord between hope and memory, and within her heart she nursed both fear and longing. And so days passed, then weeks, then months. The second flicker. It was in the glow of late summer, the air thick with the scent of ripe fruit and wood smoke, that the change first became obvious. The wife woke one morning to find her body altered, her breath deeper and steadier than before. The world seemed sharper, colors more vibrant, sounds more distinct. Her husband noticed, too, the flush in her cheeks, the brightness in her eyes. One evening, as she tended to the fire, she leaned close to embers that had grown faint, and with a soft exhale found them leaping back to life, a little brighter and hotter than they should have been. She drew back in alarm, but then allowed herself a secret smile. A month later, as leaves began to turn and fall, she whispered her news into her husband's ear beneath a sky thick with stars. "At last," she said, voice trembling with awe and fear alike. "I am with child." His arms wrapped around her, sturdy and shaking at once, and together they wept, for joy, for relief, for the sheer strangeness of hope fulfilled when despair had become habit, the fire in her veins. Her pregnancy was not like those of other women. There were days when the air around her grew inexplicably warm, when droplets of sweat gathered on her brow, even as early frost gleamed white on fence posts. The hearth in their cottage seemed to require less and less tending. Flames danced higher at her touch. Visitors came to offer congratulations, bringing baskets heavy with apples, jars of honey, and sometimes quiet prayers that this joy would not end as so many others had. The old woman from next door came too, her gaze softer now but still searching. She pressed a wrinkled hand to the wife's belly and nodded once, satisfied. "There is strength here," she murmured, "and something more." As weeks passed into months, rumors found their way into neighboring villages that something uncanny lingered around the home at the edge of the woods, that strange lights glimmered there at night, that foxes and birds crept closer than they ought. Stories wove themselves like vines, half truth, half wild imagining. But within their home, the couple held fast, arms entwined around hope made real at last. The fourth longest night. Winter arrived early and fierce that year. Snow fell in thick veils, muffling every sound. The world seemed to shrink until only their cottage, warm and flickering in the darkness, remained real. The wife's time drew near. Her pains began in earnest one evening, as storm winds howled just beyond the walls. Her husband kept watchful vigil, fetching water, boiling clean linens, stoking the fire until sweat stood out on his brow, even as drifts piled high outside. She labored through long hours, each breath drawn deep from somewhere fierce within her. At intervals, strange bursts of heat would surge from her skin. At others, she shivered uncontrollably despite blankets piled high. The old neighbor woman arrived without being called, a shadow slipping through snow's hush, and set about helping with silent confidence. At last, as dawn painted frost-pale light across the windowsill, a cry broke through stillness, a wail raw with more than mere newborn need. The old woman caught the child in practiced hands, eyes wide at what she saw. Hair dark as coal, then already streaked with copper. Skin flushed not only with life, but with warmth that radiated outward like a banked ember. "She burns," whispered the old woman, but not with fever. The mother took her daughter into trembling arms. The child's eyes fluttered open, bright gold flecked with crimson, ancient colors in an infant's face. The storm outside died suddenly, as if bowing before this new presence. Wind ceased its struggle against shutters. Fire leapt higher in greeting. And so Lina was born, the first flame come into mortal flesh. Volume of fire and family. 4 days after Lina's birth, their cottage seemed to glow from within, its windows casting gold across snow-bound fields long after other hearths had guttered out. Neighbors came bearing gifts, woolen blankets, dried herbs for colic, tiny mittens knit with more hope than skill. Many left quickly, the heat within unsettling for those used to winter's chill. But some lingered long enough to press fingers gently against Lina's cheek and marvel at her warmth. As she grew day by day, faster than most children, they found oddities difficult to ignore. The hearth never needed lighting. If anything, they struggled to keep flames from leaping too high. Cats curled close to Lina even when she wailed. Dogs whined until allowed near. At night, shadows seemed to shy away from her crib. One evening, when Lina was 3 weeks old, her father found her giggling softly at a cluster of fireflies dancing above her cradle. As he watched in wonder, he realized these were not insects at all, but tiny motes of flame, hovering obediently at her whim. He called for his wife, and together they watched Lina reach out chubby hands, the fires spinning in playful arcs around her fingers before vanishing with a sigh. "She's special," whispered her mother, fear tangled with pride. Her husband nodded slowly. "She is fire's own child." Through it all, their love deepened, a fierce protectiveness bound now not just by longing but by purpose. They would shelter this miracle from a world eager for wonders it could neither understand nor control. Sixth, rumors and portents. But word travels quickly when miracles are afoot. By mid-spring, strangers appeared at village edges, merchants with goods never before seen, wandering priests shrouded in saffron and smoke, magicians seeking portents in flame blossoms and spilled wax. A priestess of Selamin arrived one misty morning, a crescent tattoo peeking from beneath her hood. She waited at their door until invited in, eyes studying mother and child alike with gentle curiosity. "This is no ordinary blessing," she murmured when permitted to cradle Lina. "Such gifts draw attention, not all of it kind." She pressed a silver amulet into the mother's palm and left without further explanation. Soon after came a magus from the academy at Revtel, his cloak stitched with sigils both arcane and practical. He lingered longest by Lina's crib, gaze shifting from awe to calculation and back again. "Power such as hers is rare," he pronounced gravely, "too rare to go unnoticed." He offered coins, then promises of patronage, but was shown out by Lina's father, who closed the door firmly behind him. That night, he watched smoke rise from their chimney, the shape of it twisting briefly into something serpentine before dispersing on a sudden wind. Seventh flames unbound. Lina grew quickly, her first smile a spark that drew laughter from even the sternest villagers. Her first steps marked by flickers of light across packed dirt floors. On her second summer birthday, she toddled gleefully into the yard where crows scattered from sun-drenched grass. She plucked flowers whose petals curled but did not burn in her grasp. She clapped hands and conjured harmless flickers that spun like fireflies above her curls. But there were moments, flashes, when her power surged untamed. Once she screamed in frustration and set a loaf of bread ablaze. Another time, she fell ill, and fevered flames licked harmlessly along her cot until soot-stained wood gleamed anew. At play with other children, she once laughed so hard sparks danced along their clothes and hair. No harm done, but mothers kept watchful eyes thereafter. Her parents learned caution, water always nearby, windows open even in winter, lullabies sung low to soothe rather than excite. Yet beneath it all, pride warred with anxiety. In Lina burned both promise and peril, something ancient, given voice in mortal song. Eighth dreams of dragons. As Lina approached 5 years old, her hair now copper bright and unruly, she began to dream vivid dreams. A great dragon scaled in gold fire circled above a desert oasis. Its eyes found hers across leagues of starlit sand. It spoke not in words, but in warmth, a presence that filled her chest with longing for things she could not name. Sometimes Lina would wake calling for the Shining One, cheeks aglow and tiny hands clutching at unseen memories. Her mother listened carefully, her own dreams haunted sometimes by echoes of flame and scales, and held Lina close beneath blankets fragrant with lavender and ash. Her father began carving wooden dragons for his daughter's shelf, each one different, but all loved fiercely. One night, as storm winds battered shutters and Lina slept fitfully between them, both parents heard a distant roar, the sound felt rather than heard, and knew some part of what dwelled in their daughter was not wholly theirs to command or protect forever. Ninth of blood and ashes. Not all who heard rumors came seeking only blessing or knowledge. One late autumn afternoon, a day brittle with cold despite clear skies, A hooded figure waited near the edge of forest as Lina played among fallen leaves. He watched as sparks leapt from her fingertips, saw how shadows recoiled from where she danced amid sunbeams. He lingered until dusk before vanishing without trace. But that evening, smoke rose from distant trees. Someone testing boundaries never meant to be crossed. The next morning, villagers told tales. Animals found dead without mark. Wells fouled by sudden heat or chill. Strange symbols scorched onto stones near crossroads. Lina's parents understood what such signs meant. They had seen enough omens and portents these past years to know trouble's shape before it bore its teeth outright. They doubled vigilance, keeping Lina close always. Doors barred, except for trusted kin. Salt sprinkled on thresholds after sundown. Still, love could not be barricaded forever against fate's approach. 10th Ember's Blessing. On Midwinter's Eve, a night when stars burned sharpest overhead, Lina woke before dawn and wandered quietly from her bedchamber toward the hearthroom below. There she knelt before dying embers and reached out tiny hands, not for warmth but in greeting, murmuring words no 5-year-old could know unaided. Dragon light, guide me. And then, a sudden flare. Flames leapt upward without consuming wood or cloth. Gold-red light filled every corner until shadows fled entirely from their home. In that moment, both parents woke with hearts hammering and came to find their daughter ringed by harmless fire that wove itself into shapes, wings unfurling across ceiling beams, talons clutching moonlight from window glass, scales gleaming on walls now scrubbed clean by light alone. Lina turned bright-eyed toward them, smiling not only as child, but as something older. "I am safe," she said softly, and some part of them believed it must be true, because no mortal child could lie so beautifully beneath Dragonfire's gaze. When morning came, villagers found only warmth spilling from open doors. Inside, fireplace ashes spelled patterns none could decipher, but all agreed were blessings left by ancient powers passing unseen through ordinary lives. 11th. The world turned. As months passed into years, Lina's legend grew alongside her ever-brightening flame. Birds nested above lintels where once only sparrows dared. Lost travelers reported seeing lights dancing along distant treetops. Wise women whispered that fortune favored those who honored fire's daughter on festival nights. Fools who sought harm found shoes scorched or hair singed, but nothing worse. For now, and still, in quiet moments between wonder and uncertainty, the couple sat together before their hearth, watching Lina sleep as flames cast gentle shadows across walls lined with memory. "We asked for hope," murmured her mother one night. "Instead, we were given legend." Her father smiled, softly proud, fiercely protective, as he wrapped an arm about his wife's shoulders. "Even legends need loving," he replied, and together they faced whatever dawn would bring, knowing some part of this story was only theirs, while its embers reached ever outward toward a world hungry for miracles yet untold. Thus did flame take root among mortals, not as curse nor caprice, but as promise forged anew by love's endurance and Dragonfire's mercy. And so began the tale of Lina, the girl who would be called Slayer. The Flame and the Frost. Origins. Part 4. Crystal and Silence. 1. The chill between stars. Winter's breath crept early that year, tracing the windows with delicate frost before the leaves had even shed their gold. In the hush that followed the miracle of Lina's blessing, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting, perhaps, for the next turn of fate's wheel. The hearth had never burned brighter, laughter rang more often, and neighbors lingered on doorsteps, hungry for warmth and tales of dragon fire. Yet the nights grew uneasy. It began with a dream, or so the wife believed. She woke one moonless midnight, heart pounding as if to a far-off drum. The fire in the hearth glowed low and sullen. Shadows in the corners were thick as spun wool. The air was heavy, so cold she felt it in her teeth. From somewhere beyond the walls, a whisper reached her, soft as falling snow. Not all miracles are born of flame. She sat up, clutching the blanket, listening to the house around her. Beside her, her husband slept soundly, his arms still wrapped around her waist. The silence pressed in, a silence that seemed to hum with hidden promise. A sudden clarity seized her. She must go outside. Slipping from bed, she padded barefoot through the sleeping house. The embers barely flickered as she passed, but she caught Lina's eyes opening, wide and gold in the darkness, as if sensing something important was moving through their world. Into the chill night she stepped. Frost bit at her heels, but she did not falter. Overhead, stars blazed cold and knife-sharp. She walked beyond the old fence and into the tangled wilds at the edge of their land, the same forest whose roots had watched over her since childhood, whose secrets she thought she knew. But tonight, even the ancient trees seemed to draw back in hush. There, among twisted roots dusted with hoarfrost, she saw it, a crystal, ice pure, impossibly bright. Nestled in a hollow between stones, it pulsed with pale blue light, painting her skin with ghostly luminance. Something in her heart recoiled, but something else, older, deeper, ached with yearning. She reached out and touched it. The cold shot through her like truth, not cruel, but absolute. And then the crystal flared, a singer's high note shattering glass, and faded utterly from sight. No trace remained but a breath of frost swirling across her palm. She staggered back, gasping, as the whisper returned. All things must balance. All gifts must be paid for. Second, a daughter born beneath ice. The days that followed blurred like a fever dream. She told no one, not even her husband, of what transpired beneath the forest's shadow. Yet she felt it within, a growing stillness that was neither dread nor joy, but a waiting. When spring came early, heralded not by birdsong but by a strange hush, she knew this quiet would end in birth. The second daughter arrived on a night when the wind keened through the eaves and ice rimed every bough. She was small, smaller even than Lina had been, and silent, her first breath rising as a tiny cloud in the chill air. Her skin was pale as new snow. Her hair shimmered with a faint glacial blue that vanished when touched by light. The couple named her Rylai. Her father wept. Her mother only held her tighter, frightened by how cold Rylai's skin felt, even as she nestled close for warmth. Lina, all fire and laughter, watched from across the room with eyes wide as lanterns. Neighbors arrived bearing gifts and bread, but many left quickly, whispering about omens and seasons gone strange. Frost lingered late in every garden. Some said they saw snowflakes drifting in their fields despite the sun's glare. Yet In that modest house at the forest's edge, there was no room for superstition or fear. The parents loved their second child fiercely, if anything, more protectively than their first. But love could not warm Rylai, no matter how many blankets they wrapped her in, no matter how high they banked the fire, no matter how tightly her mother cradled her at night. Rylai shivered. The quiet between siblings, as weeks turned to months, Lina grew bright and wild, a blaze of energy impossible to contain. Rylai grew slowly and seldom smiled. She preferred shadows and corners, seeking solace in places where no one else dared linger long. The sisters could not have been more different. Lina's footsteps fell like sparks, Rylai's like drifting snowflakes, silent, fleeting, nearly invisible. Their mother watched them both with worry-worn eyes. She had begged for children, now she feared for them equally. One too strong for their small world, one too fragile to remain within it. One morning, when frost cracked across every window pane and daylight seemed reluctant to arrive at all, Lina knelt beside Rylai's cradle. "Why are you always so cold?" she whispered, poking a gentle finger at Rylai's hand. Rylai opened her eyes, pale blue with flecks of silver, and studied her sister's face without blinking. "It doesn't hurt," she replied quietly. "It just is." Lina frowned. "You're strange." Rylai only smiled, a faint curve of lips that seemed to shimmer like moonlight on fresh snow. Their father found them thus, fire and frost side by side, and felt hope war with fear inside him. Forth of ice and ashes, time passed in fits and starts. Blizzards giving way to unseasonable thaws. Crops failing in fields ringed by unnatural rime. Travelers returning to tell tales of meadows blooming beside snowdrifts that never melted. Among villagers, stories spread like wildfire or frostbite. How both daughters of the woodsman's house were touched by powers not meant for mortals. How their laughter could set sparks dancing along rooftops or send dustings of snow swirling through open doors. Some brought offerings for blessings, candles for Lina or crystals for Rylai, but others shunned the family altogether, crossing themselves as they hurried past. Inside their home, peace was brittle as winter branches. Rylai began to show signs of magic early, ice growing along her cradle's edge, breath hanging visibly in air, toys rhymed with frost by morning light. Her mother tried everything, boiling stones to warm her bed, tucking hot bricks beneath blankets, placing Lina nearby to share heat. The flames never harmed Rylai. They simply bent away from her skin as if unwilling to burn what could not melt. One night, as snow tapped gentle claws against shutters and silence pressed close as a second skin, Rylai began to cry, not loud or insistent like other babes might have done, but soft and mournful as a frozen stream cracking beneath its own weight. Her mother sang old lullabies learned from dragon dreams and weary days, but nothing eased Rylai's sorrow until Lina tiptoed over and pressed a palm against her sister's chest. "Don't be sad," she said firmly. "We're together." For an instant, flame flickered blue, a rare mingling where fire did not consume ice, nor ice douse flame. But after that night, Rylai rarely cried again in sadness. Instead, she grew quiet and watchful. Whispers in winter. Years turned on uncertain seasons. The sisters learned to live around one another, Lina blazing trails through meadows scorched gold in summer heat, Rylai weaving solitary paths beneath trees where frost still clung at noon. Their parents' love stretched thin between them, anxious as silk drawn taut across an uncertain future. Sometimes Lina would laugh too loudly or set sparks flying from bored fingertips. Sometimes Rylai's footsteps would leave rime that took hours to thaw from flagstones. Yet there were moments, brief as heartbeats, when balance emerged. On festival nights, when candles guttered low, Rylai's breath rekindled them with pale blue flames. When storms threatened harvests with hail or droughts threatened wells with dust, Lina stood tall beside their father and drove back ill fortune with heat only she could summon. In rare hours when both sisters forgot their strangeness, they chased each other through autumn leaves or built forts from snow and ash beneath trees older than memory itself. Still, the world beyond did not forget its unease. Ominous things happened. Flocks lost in sudden blizzards, rivers frozen solid overnight in midsummer, hearths sputtering out if Rylai wandered too close. Some villagers grew fearful enough to demand answers from their parents. "What price did you pay for such children?" they asked one night, when winds howled louder than wolves at the door. The husband stood tall then, oak strong, even beneath suspicion, and replied with grief-laced pride. "We asked for hope," he said quietly. The world answered. Sixth echoes of the ancients. Only once did their mother confess what happened on that frost-laced night. She whispered it to her husband beneath a sky pulsing with northern lights that should never have reached so far south. "I touched something old," she told him, "older than dragons or gods, a promise carved from silence itself." He listened gravely, holding her hand while Lina slept contented by heat and Rylai curled herself into a ball of snow-quiet breath beside cold embers. "What have we done?" he asked, not accusingly, but with awe thick as sorrow. "We have welcomed miracles," she replied simply, "and every miracle is born with its shadow." They resolved then, as parents do, to protect their daughters from both fear and worship alike, to keep them safe for as long as love outmatched legend. Seventh, first frosts of power. Both sisters grew. Lina, wild as wildfire, Rylai, calm as settling snow. As soon as she could toddle across stone floors, Rylai left footprints patterned in frost. Icicles clung stubbornly to gutters, even when Lina passed by, sending flares dancing along rooftops. It was then that true tension began between them, not malice, but rivalry born of difference too great for words. Lina chafed at Rylai's silence. Rylai wilted under Lina's relentless heat. Their games often ended with tears, or scorched mittens, or shattered panes rhymed white, where once flame had danced unchecked. One fateful morning, as frost gripped every blade of grass despite Lina's best efforts, a traveler knocked at their door. He bore news from distant lands. "There are rumors," he said softly, when offered bread and seat by the fire, which burned low despite Lina's presence, "of powers waking, old things stirring beneath mountain ice and desert sand alike." He looked at Rylai then, with eyes gone wide and reverent, and murmured, "Some say winter herself walks again." Their parents exchanged worried glances, but said nothing aloud save thanks for tidings brought safely through snows unseasonable even here. Eighth night of ice fire. That evening, the night before midwinter, a new storm gathered over the valley. Clouds as black as iron-smothered stars. Snow fell thick and silent until every path vanished beneath its weight. Inside their home, both sisters tossed sleeplessly, Lina burning with restlessness, Rylai shivering though no draught entered under doors sealed tight with freshly scattered salt. At midnight, a knocking sounded, not at door or shutter, but from deep within stone foundations themselves, a sound as old as mountains splitting under moonlight. Lina awoke first, dreams filled with flickering wings and burning crowns, and found Rylai already sitting upright in bed, pale blue eyes wide with knowing fear. "Come," was all Rylai whispered, and hand in hand they crept down to where embers slumbered beneath cold ashes on the hearthstone. There they found not flame nor frost, but both, a white-blue crystal gleaming beside coals still faintly red. It pulsed once when their hands brushed together over its surface, and for an instant fire flared up without consuming wood, while ice rhymed every wall without cracking stone. In that moment, something ancient shifted inside each sister. For Lina, a sense of hunger, sated only by challenge, yet unmet. For Rylai, a deep river of calm, running colder than fear itself. "Together," Lina said fiercely, and no longer quite alone. "Always," Rylai replied, and no longer quite afraid. Their parents found them thus come morning, hands joined over an ember, bright crystal, now faded into nothing but memory and legend yet to be told. 9th, the world holds its breath. As seasons turned anew, slowly yielding frost to flame, then back again, the tale of two sisters spread further afield. Fire could not wholly melt ice, ice would not wholly smother fire. Yet together they balanced one another, even if peace lasted only so long as dawn lies between night and day. Their mother watched them grow ever more wondrous and ever more apart, with hope trembling inside each breath. "We are blessed," she whispered once, knowing now what blessings cost, for some part of what was given could never be taken back, not by gods nor dragons nor time itself, and so legend grew quietly beneath roof beams dusted equally by ash and rime alike. And thus did flame find its frost, not as rival nor enemy, but as echo, as answer, as promise kept beneath two kinds of starlight. This was how Lina gained a sister, not forged by fire, but born from silence. That winter, too, is a kind of miracle. The flame and the frost. Origins. Part 5. Ashes and Shards. First, the hearth divided, long after the crystal of that fateful night had faded. Its echo lingered within the home, not as a memory, but as a subtle shift in the air, a tension that seemed to warp the very beams and stones. Where once laughter and longing had woven a quiet melody through their days, now silence was punctuated by tempests both seen and unseen. Lina grew quickly, too quickly, it seemed to her mother, who watched with equal parts awe and dread. The girl's hair shone fiercely even in dusklight, and her eyes sparkled like coals beneath ash. She possessed a wild, bright energy, quick to laugh, and just as quick to flare into anger. Rylai, by contrast, drifted through the rooms with winter's grace. Her touch cooled fevered skin, and her silences were deep. She would sit for hours by the window, tracing frost flowers on the glass with an absent finger. Her eyes held the endless patience of snowfall, until provoked. It was as if the house itself drew breath in anticipation of their next quarrel. At first, these were small things. Lina's impatience with her slow-moving sister, Rylai's gentle rebukes that stung like sleet, But as their powers grew in unpredictable fits, so too did their disputes. Second, sparks and shards. On a morning thick with drifting cloud, the sisters squared off in the kitchen. "Out of my way!" Lina snapped, elbowing past Rylai to reach the bread oven. The embers roared suddenly in response, flames licking up higher than they should. Rylai steadied herself, refusing to move aside. "If you scorch the bread again, Mama will be cross." "Well, maybe if you weren't so slow." Lina's temper surged with her magic. Sparks leapt from her fingertips and scattered like fireflies across flour and dough. Rylai's eyes cooled. Frost edged over the tabletop, creeping toward Lina's hands. Their mother entered then, voice trembling like a taut string. "Girls, enough!" But already the damage was done. The oven's fire hissed as frost choked its heart. Bread blackened on one side and froze on the other. The scent of burnt crust mingled sharply with ice in the air. Their father stood in the doorway, jaw clenched. He looked at each daughter, a storm behind his gaze, and then left without a word. Third, broken toys and shattered calm. It did not end there. As weeks spun forward and green crept back into the valley, so too did chaos grow within their home. A game of tag beneath rain-laden boughs became a spectacle. Lina darted through the orchard, trailing heat so fierce that apples baked where they hung. Rylai followed in her wake, leaving icicles dangling from new blooms, the grass crunching underfoot with rime. Their laughter started bright, but turned brittle. "You're cheating!" Lina shouted once as Rylai vanished behind a veil of fog conjured from her own breath. "Only keeping up," Rylai called softly from nowhere and everywhere at once. One afternoon they argued over a wooden doll, Mama's old keepsake, meant for gentler hands. A tug here, a shout there, suddenly flames caught in its painted hair, while frost slicked over tiny limbs until they cracked apart. Both girls froze, one by guilt, one by dread, as splinters fell to earth like ashes and snowflakes. Their mother wept quietly that night, gathering ruined pieces into her apron as if she could mend what had been broken by will alone. Fourth, storms indoors. The house weathered many storms, but never one such as these. In winter, icicles would sprout from their rafters even when fires blazed high. In summer, flowers would wilt beneath invisible heat radiating from upstairs. No matter how tightly doors were shut or salt scattered at thresholds, some nights found frost crawling along window panes or soot falling in drifts from the chimney. Neighbors whispered about the strangeness of crops freezing mid-spring or a sudden wildfires flaring at forest's edge, and gave the family wide berth at market. Some eyed Lina with fear. Others crossed themselves at sight of Rylai's pale hair. Still, there were moments of peace. Lina teaching Rylai to skip stones across melted stream ice. Rylai calming animals spooked by midsummer thunder. For every quarrel, there was an uneasy truce. But truce never lasted long. One evening, as dusk bled lavender across snow-dusted hills, their father sat alone by the hearth. He watched Lina's shadow flicker against stone while Rylai's cold presence hovered near the door. He turned to his wife at last, voice raw. "They cannot go on like this." She nodded, a silent tear tracing her cheek, and said nothing more. The last straw. The day of reckoning arrived when spring had just begun to thaw winter's hold. It began innocently enough. Lina wanted to help with sheep shearing in the fold below the house. Rylai had been asked by Mother to gather water from the stream. Each girl felt slighted, each convinced she bore the greater burden. Their spat erupted as they met on the path. "You always get to do the fun things," Lina complained hotly. "You only think it's fun because you never try," Rylai snapped back. Words turned sharp. Magic flickered between them. The grass at their feet smoldered and then froze in patches. Sheep bleated and scattered as steam rose into mist. A sudden surge. Lina's temper flared just as Rylai's patience broke. Flame lashed out. Ice splintered upward to meet it. There was a sharp crack. Then silence as an ancient tree at the field's edge split down the middle, half charred black, half sealed in sparkling frost. The sound echoed up to the house. By the time their parents arrived, smoke curled from one side of the tree while snow drifted thickly from its other half, unnatural and terrifying. This was not something that could be hidden or mended. Their mother fell to her knees amid scorched earth and frozen grass. Their father knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand upon her shoulder. The sisters stood apart, each trembling with more than just cold or heat, realizing for perhaps the first time that there were consequences beyond bruised pride or broken toys. Sixth, the night of decision. That night, silence hung heavy over dinner. No laughter or quarrel broke the hush. Instead, only the clicking of cutlery and crackle of fire filled the void. Their father cleared his throat at length, a sound that carried weight enough for all their words left unspoken. "My girls," he began slowly, "the world is not made for two such storms under one roof." Both sisters looked up, Lina's eyes defiant, yet wounded, Rylai's cold, but shining with unshed tears. "Our love for you is boundless," their mother added softly. "But we cannot keep you together any longer, not if we wish for either peace or safety." Lina objected first, a volcano held just barely in check. "You're sending us away?" Rylai whispered. "Will I see you again?" Pain twisted both parents' faces, but they held firm. "We will find you teachers, places where you might grow without destroying each other, or yourselves," their father said. "You must learn who you are apart before you can know what you might be together." He looked at Lina. "There is kin of your mother who dwells far to the south, a wise woman who knows flame as few do." He turned to Rylai. "And beyond the mountains lies Ice Rack, a land where your gift is not cause for fear, but a blessing." Tears flowed freely then, from sisters and parents alike, but none spoke further objection. The truth was too stark for denial. Together they were wildfire and blizzard sharing a single sky. That night, neither girl slept. Instead, they sat back to back in darkness, each too proud or afraid to speak first. Dawn found them thus, their breaths making small clouds in cold air not entirely natural. Seventh, farewell beneath two suns. The day of parting dawned bright but bitter. Sunlight sharp on frost, still clinging to grass, though spring had come full to the valley. Their mother packed what little each girl would take. For Lina, a red scarf embroidered with protective runes. For Rylai, a cloak lined with softest wool against northern winds. Their father pressed tools into their hands. A fire steel for Lina, a small ice crystal pendant for Rylai, tokens of love and hope alike. At the gate beneath budding ash trees, they embraced. Lina clung fiercely to her mother before pulling away abruptly, her cheeks flushed as she blinked back tears. "I'll make you proud," she managed in a hoarse whisper. Rylai sobbed openly against her father's shoulder. He stroked her hair and murmured promises that he would wait as long as it took for spring to return again, be it 1 year or 100. When it came time for farewell between sisters, they hesitated, then reached for each other at once. "I'll write," said Lina fiercely, as if by force of will letters might cross leagues untouched by blizzard or sandstorm. "You'd better," said Rylai, managing to smile through tears. Their hands clasped briefly. Flame warming frost just enough not to burn nor freeze. And then they turned down separate roads. Lina southward toward deserts that shimmered gold in morning haze. Rylai northward where mountains gleamed white against dawn blue sky. Their parents watched until both vanished beyond sight. 2 daughters drawn by powers vast and wild as fate itself. 8th, what remained? In the empty house, strange quiet settled. Ash drifted soft atop cold stone. Frost etched delicate patterns on window panes where breath once fogged glass with laughter or tears. Every so often, neighbors would glimpse odd lights flickering within after dusk, or hear distant echoes of song that seemed neither wholly joyful nor wholly sad. Legend grew quietly around hearthstones dusted equally by ash and rime. Some say flame walks still among shifting dunes, where only fire survives through longest night. Others whisper that winter's heart guards secrets north, where no summer can thaw such immortal cold. But those who remembered knew best that before fire warred with frost, there was love enough to kindle any miracle, and sorrow deep enough to freeze even God's hearts for a time. And so begins their journey apart, not rivals yet, not enemies, but sisters seeking themselves beneath 2 kinds of starlight, the flame and the frost. Origins, Part 6, Embers and Rhyme. First, under the amber sun, Lina walked south beneath a sky the color of molten brass where even the wind seemed to crackle with heat. The world changed slowly as she left her childhood valley behind. The fields gave way to scrub, then sand, and the horizon shimmered with the promise of mirages. Days stacked like sun-bleached bones. Nights brought cold sharp enough to remind her that even flame had its shadows. She wore her red scarf high against the stinging dust, boots crunching over ancient stones. Each step away from home was a reminder of her sister's tear-stained face, of her mother's trembling embrace, of the hollow in her own chest that no warmth could fill. The caravan route cut through a silent sea of dunes. Sometimes, at dusk, Lina would pause atop a rise and look northward. There, beyond sight or reach, Rylai was vanishing into her own exile. The thought seared Lina with something too raw to name. "Do not look back," she told herself. "Forward is fire's only road." Her aunt's home was little more than a collection of painted tents and wooden frames staked in the lee of a crumbling red rock spire. Children ran barefoot through the camp, laughter rising above the sizzle of cook fires, while grown folk cast curious sidelong glances at the newcomer with hair brighter than any flame. Aunt Tasmira greeted Lina with arms wide and eyes sharp as hawks. "So this is the girl who set fire to 3 ovens in one morning," Tasmira said, grinning as she enveloped Lina in a hug that nearly squeezed out what little breath she had left from the long journey. "We'll have to see if desert winds can't teach you better manners." She meant it kindly, but there was steel beneath her smile. That night, as stars wheeled overhead and desert air cooled to silk, Tasmira brought Lina to the largest tent. a space hung with tapestries embroidered in gold and ochre. She poured sweet tea, strong enough to sting, and sat across from her niece. The fire between them danced and swayed, casting long shadows against the fabric walls. "Do you know why your parents sent you to me?" Tasmira asked. Lina stared into her cup, swirling the amber liquid. "Because I break things," she said at last. Tasmira snorted softly. "You're not broken, child. You are brimming. Fire unchecked is wild, but fire mastered can shape empires." She leaned closer, voice gentling. "Your magic is not a curse. Here among my people, it will be your pride." Lina looked up for the first time since arriving. In her aunt's gaze, she saw not fear, but challenge. That night, she slept beneath strange stars, listening to wind and distant drums. For the first time since parting from Rylai, Lina dreamed not of ice or sorrow, but of fire growing steadily within her, a spark waiting for its forge. Second, into worlds of snow. Rylai's road was longer and colder still. With each mile northward, greenery receded into hardier brush. Soon even that gave way to stone and frost-bitten grass. The wind grew sharp as glass splinters, and every breath fogged before her lips. Soon snow blanketed the world in blinding white, a silence so deep it pulsed against her ears. She traveled by sled when she could, the driver a taciturn man with eyes lost somewhere beyond each horizon. Wolves watched from afar at dusk. Owls called through endless night. At last, Rylai arrived before ancient gates carved into a cliff face, runes crusted thick with hoarfrost, doors twice as tall as any man, and seldom opened for strangers. She hesitated only once before raising a trembling fist and knocking 3 times. The doors groaned aside to reveal a figure, swathed in blue robes, beard white as the snows themselves. His eyes, startlingly young, regarded Rylai with patient amusement. "You must be the one they sent from the valley," he said. His voice was calm as falling snow, but carried an undercurrent of power. Rylai bowed awkwardly. "I am Rylai." He nodded. "I am Magus Reed, keeper of knowledge, master of rhyme." He stepped aside, bidding her enter. Inside was a world of cold splendor, columns of ice that refracted torchlight into rainbows, vaults echoing with silence, scrolls preserved in glass cases rhymed with frost. Servants padded softly in thick cloaks. The air itself felt alive, crisp and bracing as biting into an apple plucked fresh from winter's bough. Reed gestured for her to follow deeper in. "Magic here is not for display," he intoned. "To command winter's heart is to respect its silence and its solitude." Rylai nodded solemnly, shivering not only from cold, but awe. The art of ashes. Lina's days quickly fell into rhythm, if rhythm could be made from chaos. Tasmira wasted no time. Before sunrise, she dragged Lina out beneath a pale sky where fire pit stones still radiated nighttime's heat. "Show me what you can do," Tasmira ordered. Lina bristled at the command, but stretched out her palm all the same. The air shimmered, and a playful tongue of flame danced above her skin before sputtering out. Tasmira barked a laugh. "Not bad, but can you keep it alive while I do this?" Without warning, she tossed a handful of sand at Lina's hand. The flame guttered instantly. "Fire is proud," Tasmira said, circling her niece. "But pride alone won't keep it alight through storm or shadow." Thus began lessons both subtle and fierce. Tasmira taught Lina to coax embers from nearly nothing, striking stones until sparks caught dry grass, whispering ancient words to stir flame without burning fingers. As days bled into weeks, Lina learned to make fire leap between torches without touching them, then shape it into whirling patterns that mesmerized onlookers after dusk. But every success brought new trial. One evening, a dust storm swept through camp, tearing tents loose and filling lungs with grit. Lina saw panic spark in children's faces as a cooking fire threatened to leap onto dry canvas. Without thinking, she flung herself forward, arms wide, and commanded the flames to collapse inward. For one agonizing instant, she felt their hunger surging against her will, then relented just enough to draw them into her cupped hands like frightened birds. The danger passed. Only scorched sand remained where fire had been moments before. Afterward, Tasmira pulled Lina aside. "Well done," she said quietly, then added, "But next time? Remember, you do not control fire by refusing its nature. You master it by learning when to let go." Lina nodded solemnly, and for the first time felt something within her shift toward understanding. The weight of winter. Rylai's education began before dawn, with meditation in the hall of frosted mirrors. Magus Reed would sit cross-legged upon a dais carved from solid ice. Rylai knelt before him, huddled in furs twice her size. "Still your breath," Reed would say each morning. "Listen, not only with ears, but with heart." At first, Rylai found only emptiness, her mind skittering over memory and worry like sleet on glass. But slowly, she learned to sense vibrations beneath the silence, water freezing deep within stone, distant avalanches groaning in sleep, even the gentle hush of snowflakes drifting through cracks high above. Lessons followed, tracing runes onto frost-blurred slate with gloved fingers, shaping tiny crystals between palms until their facets caught starlight just so, learning to walk without leaving footprints behind, or conjuring whirls of mist that would swirl around her feet at will. Failure came often and bitterly. One morning, Reed set before her a bowl filled with water drawn from hidden springs. "Freeze it solid," he instructed simply. Rylai closed her eyes and reached for that cool power within, only for nothing to happen but the water sloshing onto her knees. She flushed in shame. Reed said nothing for several minutes. At last he spoke. "Winter does not come by force alone, it comes by invitation." For days the lesson gnawed at Rylai. She spent nights awake in her small cell, watching breath condense on stone walls, wondering if she'd ever be more than a lost girl yearning for acceptance. But on the 7th morning, after hours spent listening to snowfall, she set fingers gently to bowl's edge and asked the cold to come. This time, frost crawled slowly across the water's surface, delicate as lacework. And when Reed smiled for the first time, Rylai realized victory was sometimes softest when least expected. Sisters under different skies. Seasons turned unhurriedly in exile, each girl tied inexorably to her element, yet haunted by visions of what she'd left behind. For Lina, there was always movement. She ran races through dunes with Tasmira's sons, joined fire dancers at festival fires, learned how to barter in bustling markets where merchants treated magic users with wary respect. But at night, when all lay still, she would stare into embers and imagine Rylai shivering somewhere far away. Did she hate me for going? Did I make it easier by leaving? Sometimes Lina would reach for parchment and scrawl letters she never sent. "Sister, greater than. Today I made fire leap like fish across water. Greater than. Does your ice sing when you call it? Greater than. I hope you are warm enough. Greater than. I am trying not to burn everything down. Greater than. Oh, Lina. Then she'd burn them one by one, watching hope spiral upward as ash upon desert winds. Rylai's world was quieter still, a place measured not by days, but by how long fresh snow stayed pristine before being marked by deer or raven or student's footstep. Reed rarely offered praise, but sometimes he'd pause beside Rylai as she practiced carving runes onto icicles suspended by magic alone. You have patience, he noted one afternoon, a rare gift in this house of severity. Do not mistake gentleness for weakness. At times, Rylai dreamed of home, of mother's lullabies or father's laughter muffled by snowstorm outside their door, and always of Lina, her hair aflame against twilight, her stubborn chin lifted in defiance against any odds. Each sister reached outward in spirit, unaware that their yearning burned through worlds as surely as sun thaws frost or blizzard extinguishes flame. Sixth trial by element. A year passed, then another. Lina grew taller, her confidence sharpened with every lesson survived. One afternoon, Tasmira called together all who bore magic in their blood, a conclave beneath open sky lit by braziers fanned by desert wind. Today you show what you have learned, Tasmira declared before all. Lina faced 3 tasks. Ignite fire upon bare stone, using only thought. Control its shape so precisely that it would weave between jars without leaving scorch marks. Finally, let it die so thoroughly that even smoke would not betray its passing. Nerves sparred with pride. But Lina prevailed. Flames arced where she willed them, coiled around obstacles like living serpents, vanished in silence save for lingering warmth on air. When finished, Tasmira approached, with no words this time, only an embrace fierce as wildfire itself. Rylai's trial came on the coldest night of year. Magus Reed led her out onto frozen lake beneath auroras writhing overhead, a tapestry of green and violet fire stitched through endless dark. You must call winter forth, not only around you but through you, Reed intoned softly. Let yourself be vessel, not master. Rylai knelt upon ice until numbness crept into bones, but willed herself stillness deeper than pain or fear. She reached inward past shyness and sorrow, into that secret place where cold did not wound, but soothed like mother's hand upon fevered brow. Frost blossomed beneath her palms, then raced outward until entire lake glimmered moon bright in crystalline wonder. For one eternal moment, Rylai felt herself dissolve, not girl, nor exile, nor disappointment, but living pulse at heart of winter itself. Reed conjured cloaks of woven snowflakes about her shoulders, a silent acknowledgment of mastery earned through humility rather than pride. 7th letters never sent. Some nights, when wind howled low across dunes or ice rattled window panes, each sister would lie awake, clutching tokens from home. Lina tracing runes on scarf's edge, Rylai pressing crystal pendant tight against heart. Both would whisper secrets meant only for other. If you were here now, I wish I could tell you, yet words faded on air, neither quite able to bridge distance built by necessity and fate alike. Still, in dreams, they met sometimes, one blazing with laughter beside bonfire, one serene amid falling snow, neither whole without reflection found only in others' light or shadow. 8. the shape of destiny. Time molded them, fire honed sharp by desert trials, frost tempered strong in solitary halls of rhyme. Their teachers watched change unfold, with pride tinged by silent worry. Would power unite what love once bound, or would longing twist toward rivalry, as legends warned? For now, each sister stood poised upon threshold between girlhood and myth, bearers of gifts vast as storm or sun, and hearts scarred by loss they could never quite heal nor wholly forget. Their journeys were not yet over, for soon fate would call them homeward. But for now, one shaped flame to dance with grace unknown even to wildfires, one called snow from silent sky, until all wounds lay hidden beneath shining white silence, both certain, in ways only sisters can be, that somewhere just beyond horizon the other waited, and that someday they would meet again, as equals, as rivals, as legends written in ash and rhyme alike, beneath two kinds of starlight and one undying memory of love once shared. Between hearthstone and hope, the flame and the frost. Origins. Part 7. The crowning silence. The burning song. The winter's mantle. Dawn in ice rack was not a gentle thing. It arrived like judgment, razoring past the ramparts of the sky in pale blue sheets, painting the snowfields with a cold too pure for mercy. Here, in the high sanctuary where Magus Reed made his home, silence came not from absence, but from the utter fullness of winter's presence. Even the wind, when it dared pass, moved with reverence. Rylai awoke before the light, as she always did. The trial on the frozen lake had left her hands aching with a chill that never quite faded. Her own, now, not an invader's, but also with a calmness that felt like standing in the eye of a storm. She sat up on her pallet, reaching for the cloak Reed had conjured for her, its surface shimmering with frostwork runes that shifted under her fingers, patterns of memory and hope. The pendant, a sliver of the broken crystal that had marked her birth, rested cool against her chest. Outside, snow fell in spiraling columns, each flake slow as a breath. She watched them for a long moment, searching for herself in that silent dance. A knock sounded, muffled by thick stone. Reed entered, his robes trailing pale mist. "It is time," he said simply. She followed him through winding hallways ribbed with ice. At the heart of the sanctuary lay a chamber round as the world's first sorrow. Torches burned blue-white along the walls. In their center stood an altar carved from ancient permafrost. Arrayed atop it lay 3 relics: a staff tipped with a crystal orb, a circlet woven from moon silver and hoarfrost, and a scroll sealed in wax marked with Reed's sigil. Reed gestured for her to kneel. "With these gifts," he intoned, "I mark you as Warden of Ice Rack, no longer student, but guardian after my line." His voice rang like bells frozen mid-clang. He held out the staff first. As her hand closed around it, a thrill of power pulsed up her arm, not wild and raging, as she'd sometimes feared, but measured, precise, as if 1,000 years of snow had concentrated into one perfect flake. The circlet rested lightly atop her brow. Cold fire blossomed in her bones. Finally, the scroll. When she broke the seal and unrolled it, Rylai saw not words, but images, memories of all who had held this trust before her. She glimpsed women and men both regal and humble, faces lined with wisdom or sorrow or both, each carrying winter in their veins, each standing on the same precipice she now faced. "Do not mistake guardianship for rule," Reed whispered. "Winter does not conquer, she endures. You are not here to command the cold, but to remember why it must be preserved." Rylai bowed her head, not just to Reed, but to all those silent destinies unfurling behind her. For once, she did not feel small or fragile. She felt patient, a force that would outlast grief and joy alike. Outside, the snow fell heavier. Somewhere deep beneath it all, roots drank in silence. Second, ashes and applause. Far to the south, where frost was legend and not law, sunrises were war cries. Each dawn, a parade of scarlets and golds draped across endless dunes. Here, Lina walked alone at first, a scarlet-clad shadow striding between tents of silk and leather, hair blazing where it escaped her scarf. Gossip burned in her wake like brush fire. The flame daughter returns. The dragon's blessing walks again among us. Beware your sons. But Lina did not care for whispers. She cared for proof, for contests. So she let herself be seen. She began where glory was hardest won, before the assembly of sons chosen, an arena encircled by priests in white and ochre robes. They brought forth their champions, swordsmen whose blades shimmered with solar runes, enchanters whose words could make stone weep or water ignite. Lina stood at the arena's heart, laughing flame curling around her wrists like bracelets. One by one they came against her, some bold with prideful eyes, some wary but desperate for renown, and one by one they fell, singed but unharmed when she willed it so, scorched into surrender if they tested her patience. She faced no more than she must. She boasted no more than she needed. Every victory earned another layer of wary respect, and invitations to feasts in silk tents beneath banners stitched with the sun itself. But Lina refused every suitor, courtier or champion alike. Her words brief as lightning. "Your fire is borrowed," she told them once, voice gentle but final. "Mine was paid for." The high priestess Tasmira watched from shade deeper than desert nightfall. After 3 days of trials and spectacle, it was she who summoned Lina at last, not to compete, but to create. "Let us see what only true flame can do," Tasmira commanded. So Lina stepped into the great circle carved atop Sunspire's highest terrace, while all the city watched below. She drew upon every lesson: how to make fire leap without burning, how to shape heat into beauty rather than ruin. At first, she conjured only sparks, but then, hands moving in a dance older than language, she wove flames into birds that soared above the crowd, into lions whose paws left prints that glowed before fading into gold dust, into blossoms that hovered in mid-air before raining petals alight as hope itself. By the end, all voices were one, a roar that shook the tower foundations. Tasmira approached, a crown wrought from beaten bronze and set with fire opal in hand, and placed it upon Lina's brow. "You are more than daughter of dragon or son," she proclaimed so all could hear. "You are our pyre star, our living flame." Third, letters never sent. In distant lands, one encased in eternal snow, one ablaze beneath relentless sun, each sister lay awake past midnight and listened to what silence could teach them. Rylai read the scroll again and again by lamplight, tracing faces she would never know, but who nonetheless seemed to know her. She practiced spells with staff in hand, until ice bloomed across floorboards and walls alike. When she tired, she slipped outside to let snow settle on her lashes until fear faded with dawn. She missed laughter, missed warmth, but now she realized both could be made from memory as well as presence. Sometimes she spoke aloud into the hush. "Sister, do you remember when we tried to build a snow fort inside? Father nearly lost his mind." In Sunspire, Lina lay atop cool tiles under open sky, staring up at constellations that flickered as if uncertain whether to be embers or frost. She spun flames above her palm until sleep crept near. Sometimes she caught herself murmuring secrets meant only for Rylai. "I wonder if you'd like this place. It almost never rains." Sometimes neither could sleep at all. On those rare nights when memory stung sharper than any spell, they both reached for tokens of home. Lina's scarf, heavy with runes from their mother's hand. Rylai's crystal amulet, cold against skin. If they dreamed then of running together through fields between storms and droughts, neither spoke of it come morning. The fourth, the Frost Warden's vigil. Ice Rack was not conquered in a single night, or even by a single will. Rylai soon learned that guardianship meant less about spectacle than about patience. Listening to village elders argue over floodgates and rationing saltfish through harshest dark. Weaving protective wards over children's cribs as blizzards shrieked outside. Settling disputes between stubborn traders whose tempers were as short-lived as day in deepest winter. But magic had its place too. When an avalanche threatened to swallow a hamlet whole, Rylai stood on the ridge above and drew cold about herself, not wielding it like a blade, but inviting it to settle. The slide slowed, snow thickened into glassy blue. Houses below survived unbent, save for cracked shingles easily mended by morning. Her presence became legend almost overnight. Some called her Ice Sister or Frost Warden. Others whispered that perhaps she was no mere mortal at all, but an avatar of winter itself. The truth was quieter. On lonely nights, Rylai still wept for warmth lost long ago. But now there was solace too. For every child who ran laughing through fresh fallen snow, every elder who pressed her hand with gratitude, still strong despite age's gnawing bite, every whisper in wind that sounded almost like home. She was not alone here after all. V, the Pyre Star ascends. In Sunspire, celebration flared for days after Lina's coronation by firelight. Delegations came from distant lands, emissaries bearing gold-dusted oranges from Torren Vale, Magi from Emberholt, who offered rare tomes bound in salamander hide, even traders from ice-bound ports whose breath steamed as they gawked at desert wonders. Lina stood at every feast, radiant and self-possessed, yet slightly apart, as if searching for something just beyond each applause or toast. Her power was sought after by many, rulers who wished to ally with flame rather than fear it, scholars eager to learn how she bent heat without destruction, warriors who begged for training or even a single word of blessing before battle. But always Lina returned alone to her chambers beneath Sunspire's highest dome, a place where sunlight lingered even after dusk, spilling through colored glass in rivers of blood and honey. One evening, after council, she found Tasmira waiting by her door, eyes grave above embroidered veil. "You have given us hope," Tasmira said quietly. "Now, you must grant us peace." "I don't seek war," Lina replied, letting tiredness show on her face at last. "No, Tasmira agreed. But neither did fire ask permission before it learned to burn. She pressed something into Lina's hand, a ring forged from sun iron set with a single drop of living flame. For when you must choose what to protect, Tasmira whispered, and what must be let go. 6th sisters apart, days blended into months, ice unyielding in northmost reaches, sand shifting in endless dunes below the noon star. Yet rumors began to drift between realms nonetheless, of a woman who calmed avalanches with a gesture, of another who conjured phoenixes from dust, of twin legends rising ever higher in separate skies. Stories spun faster than seasons turned. Some claimed they were rivals destined to meet upon battlefields shaped by God's own hands. Others whispered they were two halves of an ancient prophecy soon to be fulfilled. Neither Lina nor Rylai sought out such tales, but neither could wholly ignore them either. On quiet evenings, Rylai sometimes stared eastward from high towers and wondered what warmth felt like on skin rather than memory. In Sunspire, Lina traced maps where blue ink bled across parchment like meltwater, and wondered if any path led north except through solitude and shadow. Both grew strong, one from trials that demanded patience and mercy, one from contests that kindled pride and cunning alike. But both found themselves haunted by longing not just for home, but for understanding why their paths had forked so sharply, and whether fate might someday demand their crossing once more, not as children, but as equals, or adversaries, or something neither yet dared name aloud. 7. The Shape of Destiny. Word finally came, one wind-tossed twilight. A messenger lost with exhaustion at the gates of Sunspire. There had been unrest at border villages long left untended, an ancient power stirring between melting snows and creeping sand. Ice and flame both blamed, though neither present, for storms that shattered crops and spun wildfires through forests once thought safe as stone itself. Lina hesitated only a moment before gathering staff and cloak. The ring Tasmira gave heavy upon her finger now. "Send word north," she commanded. "Tell them I come not for conquest, but counsel." That same night, Reed found Rylai tending sick children near river's edge. Even his measured calm stretched thin by unease. "Change comes," he warned softly. "Not just winter nor thaw, but something older." Rylai closed her eyes, feeling currents tug at blood and bone alike, and nodded once. "Then let me meet it standing." They set forth, sunward through blizzard-haunted passes, northward across dunes scorched bare by hunger for rain, each guided by rumor of others' coming, each uncertain whether they sought reunion or reckoning, each carrying power vast enough to shape kingdoms, yet hearts marked first by longing, then loss, and now the fragile hope that when flame meets frost once more, it will be not as enemies, but as sisters forged stronger by all that kept them apart, and all that yet might bring them home. Snow fell soft on empty hearths. Embers glowed behind shuttered eyes, and far beyond horizon, two legends walked toward fate, with names known now to all who listen, for fire and for silence at world's end. The Flame and the Frost, Origins, Part 8, When Siblings Become Storm. First, rumors on the wind. It began as a hush in the heart of the world, a braided current running beneath market laughter, behind prayers at the wayside shrines, onward through the veins of old forests, and across the broken backs of mountains. The tales grew louder with every village crossed, every caravan that staggered in from the wastes, a rumor so persistent it gnawed at peace itself. There were two who shaped storm and drought, frostbite and wildfire, two who had once shared cradle and hearth, now divided by fate, by pride, and by something older still. Some called them saviors, the pyre daughter whose laughter could thaw despair, and the ice sister whose hand stilled the wrath of avalanches. But more whispered of omens, of the sky's uncertain balance, and of a reckoning soon to fall like hammer and hail. In the desert city of Sunspire, heat shimmered above the red stone streets as Lina paced along her balcony. Even at dusk, the air swelled with restless memory of sandstorms barely held at bay, of phoenixes circling high above chanting towers. The messenger's words replayed in her mind: unrest at the border, crops blackened by frost not of this world, villages burned despite winter's grip. Below, the city's fires burned brighter than ever, as if to answer some silent threat from afar. Not everything can be solved with flame, her aunt had told her once, but Lina's eyes sparkled with a fire that had only grown sharper with each year, apart from her family, each year growing into herself, alone. Meanwhile, far to the north, Rylai stood in a circle of standing stones half swallowed by snow. The children she had healed now slept safely in their cottages. Reed stood silent at her side. "They blame you for the blight," he murmured, his breath misting in the chill. "As if you could command such cruelty." Rylai's reply was a thin stream of mist. "It is easier to fear what they do not understand." She closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of winter deep in her marrow. A restlessness tugged at her soul, a sense that the world was narrowing to a single point somewhere between north and south, storm and sun, a point where she would meet her sister not as memory, but as rival. Second, the drawing lines. Their journeys began in opposite directions. Still, the earth seemed to tilt toward convergence. Lina rode with merchants through barren canyons where glass twisted from ancient heat. She watched soldiers drill beyond city walls, watched their faces as they whispered of frost demons and blamed cold for famine and failing flocks. She remembered Rylai as a shivering child, blue-lipped and hidden behind their mother's skirts. She tried and failed to picture innocence behind these rumors. One night, she came to a campfire blazing atop a lonely bluff. There, among traders huddled in cloaks, she found a story already waiting for her. "North folk say it was an ice witch," one grizzled man offered, eyeing Lina's crimson hair. "Turned rivers solid overnight. Whole villages starved." Lina bent close to the flames, studying their dance. Maybe they simply forgot how to share. Her words cut sharper than a flame. The trader fell silent. The others glanced at her with wary respect. Later, alone beneath stars thick as spilled salt, Lina stared into the embers and wondered, would Rylai let innocence freeze? Would she have the will, or simply lose control? Was it so easy to become what they feared? In the north, Rylai heard similar tales of firestorms flickering at dusk on southern borders, of fields blackened by a sun gone mad. In her tower of ice and silence, she pressed a palm against cold glass and imagined Lina, standing in firelight, proud as summer itself, unbending as noon. Did Lina set those fields ablaze by choice? Or had her power slipped wild in anger or grief? Rylai remembered hands reaching for hers in childhood, a warmth that had once been comfort but now felt like warning. Third, letters never sent. As days melted into weeks, both sisters found themselves haunted by words left unsaid. In Sunspire, Lina drafted letter after letter on parchment scorched around the edges. Rylai, are you well? Has winter softened? Are you alone up there? She crumpled every attempt before dawn. Flame made swift work of regret. In Ice Rack, Rylai sometimes traced Lina's name in frost upon her window pane. Do you remember when we played beneath ancient trees? Did you ever forgive me for leaving? The wind stole each message before it formed. Yet across leagues of tundra and desert alike, they were moving inexorably toward each other, drawn by rumor, fear, and longing for something neither could name without blushing or burning. The gathering storm. Eventually, word reached all corners. Both sisters traveled toward the old forest, the birthplace they had left behind. Each step seemed guided by unseen hands, each mile heavier than the last. Lina arrived first. She found the house half swallowed by brambles and memory, windows shuttered tight against wind and time, hearth cold for years beyond counting. Inside lingered ghosts, laughter echoing in empty rooms, sunsets bottled in dust motes swirling through slanting light. She knelt before the hearth and pressed her forehead to cold stone, fighting tears and anger alike. I wasn't enough, she whispered to darkness. Footsteps crunched outside, soft as falling snow. Rylai stood in the threshold, blue cloak trailing frost across warped floorboards. Her eyes glimmered with familiar sorrow and unfamiliar strength. For a moment, neither moved. Two halves cleaved apart by years of yearning and resentment. Then Lina rose, brushing ash from her hands. You're late. Rylai's reply was quiet as dawn. You're always early. They smiled, small, unsteady things, but neither warmth nor chill closed that oldest distance between them. Words like fire and ice. They sat across from one another beside an unlit hearth. Between them lay all they hadn't said. The rivalry nurtured by separation, pride sharpened by solitude, wounds crusted over, but never truly healed. Lina broke the silence first. Do you believe what they say about me? That I burned those fields? Rylai shook her head. No more than I believe I cursed their crops. Lina's shoulders stiffened. They want us to fight. I know, Rylai replied softly, but why should we give them what they want? Because maybe it's true. Lina's voice caught, fierce but tremulous. Maybe I am too much for this world. Maybe you are too cold for anyone to love. Rylai flinched, but then met Lina's fire with steady gaze. Or maybe we are what this world needs most. If only we could decide how to use what we were given. A long, silent stretch between them, woven from hope and heartbreak alike. You always envied my strength, Lina said finally. And you always envied my calm, Rylai replied. They laughed, a brittle sound, but beneath it ran real memory. Childhood games beneath green boughs, secrets shared before sleep claimed them both. But those days felt impossibly distant now, burned away or frozen solid by all that had come between. Sixth, sparks fly. As dusk bled into night, tension crackled like static in summer air. Outside, wind howled through warped shutters. carrying with it echoes of distant voices. Which sister will yield? Which will be queen? Which will burn? Which will freeze? Lina stood abruptly. Flames flickered around her fingers. Shadows danced wild on timbered walls. "You think I wanted this?" she demanded. "To be feared rather than loved? To be legend instead of daughter?" Rylai rose too, the air around her shimmering with cool mist. "You think I asked to be sent away? To become someone else just to survive?" The room chilled. Embers smoldered fiercely. For one breathless moment their powers struggled, flame meeting frost just above splintered floorboards. Sparks hissed where magic clashed, neither giving ground nor wholly surrendering. "Maybe we need to prove ourselves," Lina gasped. Rylai nodded, eyes shining with tears and determination alike. "Maybe only then will anyone see us as more than curses." They stood locked together, not quite foes, but no longer sisters, unbroken. Seventh echoes of destiny. Night deepened. An aurora crackled overhead, fiery red braided with icy blue. The world itself seemed to hold its breath as two destinies aligned for reckoning. "Come," Lina said at last. "Let us see if prophecy cares for hearts, or only for power." They stepped outside into starlight, the scorched earth solidifying beneath frost-bitten grass. The air alive with magic so potent that even ancient trees bowed low. Above them hovered memories, the promise of home now lost, the certainty that something greater awaited if only they dared reach for it together or tear each other apart trying. "Do you remember what Mother said?" Rylai asked quietly as they crossed into moonlit clearing. Lina swallowed hard. "If you can't be kind, be brave," Rylai finished for her. Their eyes met, opposites perfectly mirrored. And even now, some small spark of kinship lingered beneath all that thundered between them. Eighth first clash. Without warning or further word, trial began, not of anger, but necessity. Not for hate, but for meaning itself. Lina conjured a spiral of fire, dazzling golds and scarlets licking skyward until night seemed driven back by daybreak's memory. Rylai answered with silent certainty. Wind coiled about her arms, then burst outward in a tide of crystalline shards that caught and reflected every flame until the world was awash in light both searing and pale cold. They circled one another, testing skill and resolve alike, neither yielding fully nor pressing advantage too far. Each move was echo and answer. Flame wheel met frost nova. Dragon slave hissed through curtains of falling snow. With every exchange, old wounds reopened, but also something else. Understanding born not just from shared pain, but from mutual awe. "You've grown," Rylai whispered between spells, voice trembling, but proud. "So have you," Lina replied, not mocking this time, but marveled truly at her sister's power. The forest trembled around them. Ancient runes blinked awake beneath their feet, as if remembering stories older than either sister's name. Ninth choices: burn and freeze. At last, both paused, breathless and spent, magic sparking harmlessly now between upraised palms. They stood in silence, ringed by scorched grass and ice-laced ferns, their childhood home looming behind them like a question left unanswered too long. "We could keep fighting until there is nothing left," Rylai said softly. Lina looked away, shamed by all she'd nearly unleashed, yet unwilling to surrender completely. Or we could find another way. But can we? Rylai asked, not pleading, but searching for hope beneath all they'd lost. The wind shifted. Fireflies blinked uncertainly in cooling air. For one moment, it seemed possible that choice might yet belong to them. Not prophecy, nor fear, nor pride, but simply two sisters choosing what to become next. But then, distant horns sounded beyond the trees, a reminder that world watched their every move, that destiny would not wait forever for answers forged only in love or pain. 10. The rift widens. As dawn threatened eastward horizon, sisters parted once more, this time by necessity rather than design. I'll prove I'm more than legend, Lina vowed, as much to herself as to Rylai, no matter what it costs. Rylai's reply was barely audible above rising wind. And I'll protect what I can, even from you if I must. They walked away from ruined home in opposite directions, each carrying scars both fresh and ancient, each certain now that battle was not merely coming, but already begun within themselves as much as without. Somewhere between flame and frost, beneath auroras, torn between red and blue, the world held its breath, waiting for war, or for peace, to claim two sisters whose names would echo through ages, as both warning and hope. At world's very end, snow drifted soft over scorched earth, ash settled on frozen grass, and in distant corners the tale grew, even as its heroes walked onward, not quite enemies, not yet friends, forever changed by all that divided, yet still bound, by longing and legend alike. For when flame meets frost again, the world itself will tremble, and perhaps at last understand. The Flame and the Frost, Origins. Part 9, where legends are forged. The summoning of war. The land itself seemed to sense what was coming. In the ancient heart of the world, where the great trees arched so high even the sun bowed before their might, a fissure split open, a wound in the earth, raw and trembling. It was here, upon the sacred field where ancients slumbered and war never truly ended, that the sisters would meet again. Perhaps it was fate, perhaps pride, or perhaps some deeper magic woven by jealous gods. Regardless, word spread on wind and water. The flame and the frost will clash where all destinies intertwine. Armies gathered, heroes and monsters, spirits and mortals, drawn by a sense that more than victory or defeat would be decided this day. Every blade of grass, every shard of ice and trembling ember waited. Second arrival. Lina arrived first, riding on a chariot of flame that scorched the ground to glass beneath its wheels. Her hair streamed behind her like a banner. Her eyes burned with anticipation and old wounds not yet healed. She stood tall, proud as the desert sun, sun garb shimmering, no longer just a daughter or a symbol, but the living avatar of fire itself. Not long after, Rylai appeared, her passage marked by silent snow and a hush so absolute it seemed even time forgot to move. She walked alone, draped in sapphire robes heavy with frost. Where Lina's presence demanded attention, Rylai commanded respect by her very restraint. Even the ancient pines bent their limbs as she approached. For a moment, they regarded each other across the field. No longer children, no longer students, but equals in power, if not in heart. The challenge. A voice boomed, ancient and many-tongued, the will of the ancients themselves. Let it be known, this field is hallowed ground. Here, fate will be tested. The flame and the frost must choose, destroy or redeem. The armies held their breath. All knew what was at stake, not just pride or supremacy, but the very balance of creation. Lina's voice broke the silence first. "We end this today, little sister." Rylai's eyes narrowed, a glint of sadness within. "We end something, but what will remain?" Their words hung suspended between them, promise and threat at once. Fourth clash of elements. The first blow was not fire nor frost, but memory. 1,000 unspoken hurts igniting as Lina unleashed a searing arc across the battlefield. Flames raced like wild stallions, consuming all they touched. But Rylai was ready. Ice blossomed upward in an instant, a wall of mirrors reflecting both Lina's fire and her fury. Snow whirled thick around her, cooling every spark that dared approach. They circled each other, each strike an echo of their years apart. Dragon Slave met Crystal Nova. Light strike array shattered against Frostbite. Each tried to outpace the other, not just in magic, but in will. Lina pressed forward with relentless heat. Rylai retreated only to ensnare her sister in fields of biting cold. Around them, the war between ancients raged, heroes clashing, trees falling, illusions shattered and remade by hands unseen. But even titans paused to watch the duel at the center, the contest that would decide more than a single battle. Words among chaos. Between volleys of magic, their voices rang out, raw and unfiltered. "You never understood," Lina shouted, flames wreathing her arms. "You always stood in my shadow, always clinging to hope and patience while I burned to be seen." Rylai's answer was quiet, but unyielding. "You mistook gentleness for weakness. I carried our burdens too, even when you refused to see me." They fought not just for victory, but for acknowledgement, for the right to be seen as more than what others made them. A burst of flame swept too close, Lina's anger flaring uncontrolled, and for a moment Rylai faltered, falling to one knee as ice cracked beside her. Yet in her eyes was not fear, but resolve. "We are not enemies," Rylai whispered through frost-bitten lips, "but we may become so if we do not choose." Sixth turning point. The world trembled. Time seemed to slow. Around them, champions fell and rose again as ancients' power rewove their destinies. Such was the nature of this place. Still, none intervened between the sisters. None dared. Lina drew upon her full strength now, her body wreathed in flame until she seemed almost made of sunlight itself. Rylai called winter from the highest peaks, shrouded herself in a blizzard so dense that fire guttered and died before reaching her. They met at last in the center of the field, a moment suspended between annihilation and mercy. Fire clashed with frost so fiercely that steam roared skyward, obscuring everything. In that white-hot fog, Lina's hand closed around Rylai's wrist. Neither attack nor embrace, but something desperate in between. "Why can't you yield?" Lina gasped, voice breaking, not with rage, but with sorrow, old as their childhoods. "Because I am your equal," Rylai replied softly, even as frost crept over her own skin, even as tears froze on her lashes. "And because I love you too much to let you burn alone." Seventh Ascendance. The ancients awakened fully now. The radiant pulsed with healing green light. The dire thundered with crimson malice. The ground split, roots writhing, stone shuddering as all creation seemed poised on the edge. Lina and Rylai stood at the heart of it all, a storm of every season raging around them. And then something changed, not within their magic, but within themselves. Rylai loosened her grip on control, let her ice flow not to wound, but to soothe, tempering Lina's fury instead of opposing it head-on. For the first time since their birth, their powers met, not as adversaries, but as complements. Fire warming ice without melting it, frost cooling flame without extinguishing it. Together they rose above the battlefield, caught in an aurora, born of both fire and snow. Their armies fell silent. Even the ancients stilled for one breathless instant. "Let us end this," Rylai said, not as plea, but as command. Lina nodded, eyes full of wonder, and together they unleashed one final spell. Not destruction, nor dominance, but unity. A pillar of light erupted skyward, a corona both scalding and serene, shaking the heavens themselves. For one moment, fire and frost were one. For one moment, all divisions ceased. 8. The world remade. When the light faded, silence reigned. The battlefield was transformed. Where scorched earth met frozen tundra, now bloomed fields of iridescent flowers neither sun nor snow alone could birth. The ancients slept once more, content for now, appeased by sacrifice and reconciliation alike. The armies withdrew in awe. Word spread far beyond what eyes could see or ears could hear. The flame and frost have chosen peace, but peace does not erase scars. Lina stood in the new dawn, hair dimmed now to a gentle ember, and looked at her sister with both gratitude and uncertainty. Rylai pressed her hand into warm soil, smiled softly through exhaustion. "We are legend now," she murmured. Lina snorted, a laugh half ashamed and half relieved. "I always hated legends, but sometimes," Rylai replied, "they teach us who we might become." 9th, echoes across ages. In time, songs arose of two sisters who turned war into creation, who faced each other and chose not oblivion, but understanding. Children told tales beneath hearths, of nights lit by flame and guarded by soft snow, their faces lit with hope that even greatest divides might be crossed by love or courage or both. Some say that in moments when auroras dance across midwinter skies, or when summer storms snap cold with sudden hail, it is simply the sisters playing, reminding all who listen that balance is fragile and precious beyond words. And somewhere deep within that reborn field, where ancients sleep and flowers bloom from both fire and frost, the world remembers what divides may also unite, what wounds may also heal. And so legends endure, not just as warnings or promises, but as proof that even amidst endless conflict, choice remains. And through choice, hope ever kindles anew. 10th epilogue. Hearth restored. Years passed, or perhaps centuries. Time flows strangely. Where legend walks hand in hand with memory, a house stands once more at forest's edge. Not quite as before, but true enough for those who remember longing. Birds sing at dawn. Embers glow warmly on winter nights. Sometimes snow falls soft, even in late spring. Within that house sit two women grown wise through pain and wonder alike. their laughter echoing across fields reborn by their gift and courage. They are no longer only flame or frost, but sisters who forged peace when all else demanded war. And so it is told, in every corner, swept clean by wind or fire, in every child's hopeful gaze, that when next flame meets frost, the world itself will pause, and perhaps once more choose understanding over ruin. For theirs is a legend born not from conquest, but from what lies beyond: forgiveness, balance, and love eternal as sun and snow together at world's very end.